And in episode 3, the meeting with Maya doesn't go great. Maya basically tells Omar exactly what she told Marty. He's going to need to give up considerable amount of assets and probably do jail time. Omar's not really interested in that. Meeting ends with Maya getting off of Omar's private plane and heading back to the birds. And as soon as she gets back, she packs up her stuff, tells Marty that until Omar is ready to make a serious offer, he's to stay away from her, and then she leaves. Marty then calls up Omar and asks him his side of the story, but Omar just says, "You're going to need a sample for this pharmaceutical company. They're going to want to know what they're buying, so I'm going to send you up a sample." The only mention of the meeting with Maya is when Omar says, "You're going to get her back for me, because you don't win until I win." After it calms down a little bit in the Bird household, Wendy has both Charlotte and Jonah come outside. She's made a little bit of a makeshift memorial for Ben. She's trying to win back Jonah. She tells both kids they can come out here, think about Ben, write a message to him on a piece of paper and burn it, and he'll get it. She also apologizes for putting the kids what they've gone through the past couple of years. Now, while this does curry favor with Charlotte, it doesn't work with Jonah. He just heads back in and continues to launder money for Ruth and Darlene. But his reluctance to join Wendy's line of thinking is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Wendy also heads back inside and cuts the power to the basement, which cuts the power to Jonah's computers, which cuts the power to Jonah laundering money. Later that night, Omar arrives back in Mexico and Javi's waiting for him. Javi thinks that Omar went up there to talk to the birds about the deal with Shaw Pharmaceuticals, and he's able to convince Navarro that somebody from the family should be up there monitoring this deal. Javi doesn't really trust the birds. So naturally, he volunteers to bring the sample to Chicago himself. Navarro agrees, and the birds are unaware that the sample is going to be delivered by Javi. The next day, Wendy goes to work. Now that she's got some money to play with and get some political power on her foundation's board, she calls Jim up and has him set up a meeting with Schaefer, the guy that Wendy doesn't really like. Jim suggests that maybe they go ahead and get some other politicians first and circle back to Schaefer, but Wendy wants to get the ball rolling with Schaefer because she knows it's going to take a little bit of convincing for him to come to their side. She then drives to go and talk to Maya. After all, she was the entire reason why Maya got on that plane, so she tries to smooth things over with her. When Maya opens up the door, the first question she asks is, "Does Omar have something for me?" But Wendy doesn't even respond to that, just saying, "I would be upset too." She tells her that she knows what she's going through because the first time she met Navarro, it took a full day for her to kind of calm down. Maya explains to Wendy that she still needs something from Navarro to go to the FBI with. Wendy then heads home, and when she gets home, she sees Ruth and Jonah packing up Jonah's equipment and putting it in Ruth's truck. Jonah realized that after Wendy cut the power, he couldn't continue to try to work there. He needed to find a more secure location. Ruth isn't too thrilled when Wendy shows up, and Wendy's wondering what's going on, and Marty explains. And Wendy feels like she's justified in her actions. She tries to plead with Jonah, telling him not to go, because if he wants to be mad at anybody for what happened to Ben, he shouldn't be mad at her, he should be mad at Ruth. Ruth is the one that got him out of the hospital when he just wasn't right. She's the reason he's dead. And Wendy definitely can't understand why Jonah would go and work with Darlene Snell after what Darlene did to him. This pleading, though, doesn't work. Jonah grabs his stuff, gets in Ruth's truck, and leaves. Ruth drives Jonah over to the Lazy O and has him set up in one of the empty rooms. And as Jonah is setting up his stuff, Wyatt walks up to her because he saw her at the farm the previous day talking to the people that cut the heroin about when they can have the product ready. That's not her role. He starts yelling at her if Darlene finds out, but Ruth cuts him off and says, she's not going to find out, is she? Because she's not going to care when she's holding all of that money. This is a good idea. Wyatt starts telling Ruth that he really wants this relationship between him, Darlene, and Ruth to work out. But the reality is, it never seems to work out between Ruth and her employers. It always goes sideways. Ruth ends up messing it up, and it becomes personal. It becomes more about the fight than it does the work. And even though Ruth says that's not true, she realizes that what Wyatt says is in fact true. It just hurts to hear. After Jonah is finished setting up, he heads home, and during dinner, the birds are planning a trip to Chicago. Marty has to go meet Claire Shaw with the sample. Wendy is planning on meeting with Schaefer, and Charlotte needs to go have a one-on-one conversation with Aaron about what happened to Helen. Aaron's been calling Charlotte, thinking that she might know. So finally, Charlotte just said, "I'll look around and see what I can find out." The only person not going is Jonah. He's invited, but he says, "I have work." When the birds take off, Jonah heads to the Lazy O to continue his work of laundering money. And as he's explaining the program to Ruth, Darlene shows up. And immediately Ruth knows that Wyatt ratted her out. Darlene basically tells Ruth to know her place and then takes off. Darlene then heads right to Frank Cosgrove. She wants to try and win him back with the deal. She even brings him a bunch of heroin, but he's not interested in it. He's not going to be her distributor. And he also says that Darlene is $500,000 in the hole to him because she lost out on her rehabs. Darlene, just like the birds, was planning on building a bunch of rehabs. It was actually Darlene's plan first. Marty and Wendy used their political power to get Darlene's permits pulled. It cost Frank Cosgrove a bunch of money. Darlene figures that he can get that money by distributing her heroin. But Frank doesn't want to do that. He just wants his money. So Frank tells her to go get some distribution and pay him what she owes him. She shoots back, "If I do that, you're not going to see a cent." And Frank says, "I am demanding you give me what you owe me." But Darlene is never taken well to demands, and she walks out. While Darlene was visiting the KC mob, 3/4 of the birds arrive in Chicago. Marty and Wendy actually end up running into a couple of people they used to know back in the day. As they're chatting, Marty gets a phone call from Navarro asking for an update on Maya, and Marty has the balls to say, "We're going to do things our way," and hangs up on Navarro. The family then split up. Charlotte meets up with Aaron, gives her the bad news, and Aaron right away thinks the birds had something to do with it. Charlotte tries to tell her that she's crazy, and why would Marty and Wendy even allow her to show up in the park and tell her the truth if that were the case? But Aaron's in disbelief. Wendy ends up meeting up with Jim, and they go to pay Schaefer a visit. Schaefer is reveling in this. Wendy, though, is undeterred and starts making her pitch. The problem is Schaefer sees right through it. He looks at Wendy and says, "You want to buy my obedience with some third-rate flattery and a board seat?" And Wendy says, "Well, how about some access to a $150 million war chest that we have? Think about that purchasing power and what that could buy you across the region. We're talking the road to the White House." Schaefer, since he is retired, knows that his reach only goes so far, and the fact that he could once again be in somewhat control of who goes to the White House is very enticing to him. He doesn't say yes, but he also doesn't say no. And as Wendy is leaving, she tells him, "Don't take too long with this decision. These board seats are filling up pretty fast." While that was going on, Marty was at Shaw Medical waiting for the sample, and he's surprised as ever when the sample shows up, but it's in the hands of Javi. A driver and a bunch of security pick up both Marty and Javi. They force both of them to hand over their cell phones, and then they drive them to a secure location. And that secure location is an old, empty warehouse that Shaw used to run out of. As Claire is testing out the sample, Marty explains to her that he's worked it out, so it's going to look like the drugs are still coming from Tasmania. Javi then explains that they're reworking the product to make it look like it's medical grade. If everything goes well, this is going to be nothing more than a sleight of hand. Claire then tells both of them that the sample has passed the test, and Javi says, "Great, looks like I'll be seeing a lot more of you then. From here on out, I'm going to be my uncle's personal representative on this deal. I'd love to grab dinner with you when I'm in town to supervise the first shipment." He awkwardly shakes Claire's hand and then tells her that she's the first gringo whose family has killed more people than his. The whole interaction freaks Claire out. Javi and Marty then leave and head back to the Shaw Medical Building, where they get their cell phones back. Javi's a little annoyed because he missed a phone call about a gun shipment that's going to be delivered that night. And when Marty hears this, he sneaks away and calls up Navarro and says, "Give up that gun shipment that Javi's setting up for tonight. That's exactly what Maya is looking for. If you want to get her back, this is how you do it. You've already won the war. Those guns are going to be a lot more valuable as a bargaining chip than in anyone's hands." Navarro is a little suspicious, and Marty, in an effort to prove that he's not screwing him over, gives him Maya's phone number so that he can personally call her and tell her herself about the shipment of guns. And Navarro ends up calling her up. Maya's a little freaked out that Navarro has her phone number, but Navarro ends up giving her the information, and Maya ends up going to her bosses with it. The FBI, Border Patrol, the police, they all head out and just wait for the guns to show up. That night, the birds then go out to dinner with Javi. They seem to be having a nice time. Javi is chatting up Charlotte about her college decisions. But Javi gets a phone call, and he excuses himself. And Marty and Wendy can tell by the reaction of Javi that this must have been the gun bust call. When he gets back to the table, he stares Marty down. And Marty very calmly asks, "Is everything all right?" And Javi stares at him a little bit more, but eventually says, "Absolutely." Javi then sits down, pours some champagne for everybody, and proposes a toast to the bird's business being his business, and to his business being theirs. And as the birds and Javi are toasting, back in the Ozarks, the fourth bird member is at a celebration. Ruth closed the deal that night with Kenny Stone and Darlene's heroin. This, of course, is without Darlene's knowledge. The party, however, gets interrupted when Darlene finds out about it. She storms up on Ruth and asks her, "Why shouldn't I cut your head off right now?" And Ruth then hands over a bag of cash. Darlene's a little stunned and is looking at it, and that's when Ruth answers her question. She says, first of all, there's a lot more cash where that came from. Second of all, you've been waiting for a partner with as much guts as you your entire life. And third, if you try to cut my head off, there's no guarantee that I don't cut yours off first. Darlene thinks about what she said, looks down at the cash, and then smiles, telling Ruth, "I knew I made the right call bringing you on." Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. Make sure to be nice in the comment section. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen there, I'll get it up in a few days, not to worry. And I have merchandise, so go buy a mug or something. It's never too early to think about Christmas gifts, folks. Once again, thank you for checking out this recap.